Welcome back, everyone. If you're here for a good scary story, you're in the right place. Every nightmare begins with something ordinary. A phone call, a text, a stranger, a single moment that doesn't seem important until it's far too late. And tonight, you're about to hear one of those stories. Tonight, you'll hear one truly terrifying story about the ghost of a young girl who still haunts Harrowfield Elementary School. You'll discover what really happened to her and the dark secrets that have remained hidden within the walls of Harrowfield Elementary for decades. Lock the door, look over your shoulder one last time, and let's dive into tonight's nightmare. The thing about small towns is that everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everything, except for the things nobody talks about. Claire Novak learned that distinction the hard way during her first week at Harrowfield Elementary School in Harrowfield, Pennsylvania. She was 26 years old, fresh out of her teaching credential program at Penn State, and so desperately eager to prove herself that she'd taken the first job offer that came her way, a fourth grade position at a school so old it still had original chalkboards in half the classrooms and radiators that clanked and hissed like dying animals every time the heat kicked on. The school had been built in 1931. The locals called it the old building, even though there wasn't a new building anywhere in sight. It was 3 stories of dark red brick, narrow windows, and hallways that smelled permanently of chalk dust, floor wax, and something else underneath. Something organic and damp that Claire couldn't quite identify, but that made her stomach turn slightly every time she caught a strong whiff of it. She'd driven into Harrowfield on a Sunday afternoon in late August, 2 days before teacher orientation. The town itself was the kind of place that looked like it had been frozen sometime around 1978 and never fully thawed. Main Street had a diner, a hardware store, a pharmacy that doubled as a greeting card shop, and a bar called Doyle's that had a neon Budweiser sign in the window and a parking lot that was full at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The houses were mostly older Victorians and craftsman bungalows, well maintained but somehow tired looking, like people who were doing their best but hadn't slept properly in years. Claire had rented a small house on Elm Street, and yes, she'd made the nightmare on Elm Street joke to herself approximately 40 times during the move-in process, about 6 blocks from the school. Her landlord was a quiet man named Gerald Briggs, who had handed her the keys with minimal conversation, and then said, almost as an afterthought, as he was walking back to his truck, "You're the new teacher over at Harrowfield Elementary?" "That's right," she'd said, smiling her best first impression smile. He'd nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "You'll want to keep your door locked at night," he said. "This is a safe town mostly, but still." Then he got in his truck and drove away before she could ask him what mostly meant. Orientation was held on Tuesday in the school gymnasium, which smelled like old sneakers and something chemical, industrial cleaner maybe, and had a basketball court that was so scuffed and worn you could barely make out the painted lines. About 30 teachers filed in and found folding chairs arranged in a semicircle facing a portable projector screen. Claire sat next to a woman named Donna Pelham, who taught 3rd grade and had been at Harrowfield Elementary for 11 years. Donna was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and friendly in that specifically Pennsylvanian way, warm, but with a core of bluntness underneath that let you know she wasn't going to waste your time, or hers, with unnecessary softness. "You're the new 4th grade?" Donna asked, extending her hand. "Claire Novak." "Yeah." "Donna Pelham, 3rd grade. How long have you been in town?" "Since Sunday." Donna nodded. You find the place okay? Elm Street, little house near the corner of Maple. Something crossed Donna's face, just for a second, barely perceptible, like a cloud shadow moving across a field. She covered it quickly with a smile. "That's a nice street," she said. "Close to the school." "That's what I figured," Claire said. She almost asked about the shadow she'd seen cross Donna's face, but Principal Hartley was already at the front of the room calling for attention, and the moment passed. The school itself was laid out on 3 floors. The first floor held the gymnasium, cafeteria, administrative offices, and the kindergarten and first grade classrooms. The second floor was 2nd through 4th grade. The third floor, and this was what nobody mentioned directly during orientation, what Claire only discovered by wandering during the lunch break on her own. The third floor was closed. Not closed for renovation, not closed for repairs exactly, though that's what the sign on the stairwell door said. Third floor, maintenance access only, keep door closed. It was just closed. Had been for years, from what Claire could gather. When she mentioned it to Donna over turkey sandwiches in the teacher's lounge, Donna took a careful sip of her coffee before answering. "Old part of the building," she said. "Structural issues. They've been meaning to renovate it for years, but the budget never comes through." "So it's just empty up there?" "Far as I know." "Has it been empty the whole time you've been here?" Donna set down her coffee cup. "Claire," she said, and there was something deliberate in her voice, something that walked a careful line between friendly advice and a warning. "This is a small town. People here, they have long memories. There are things that..." She stopped, started again. "Just focus on your classroom, your kids. You're going to be great." She picked up her coffee and changed the subject, and that was that. Except Claire was the kind of person who couldn't just let things go. It was, depending on who you asked, either her best quality or her most exhausting one. She'd been that way since she was a kid herself, the one who pulled at loose threads, who couldn't leave a question unanswered, who lay awake at night turning things over and over in her mind until she'd worked them down to something she could understand. So that night, alone in her new house on Elm Street, she opened her laptop and started searching. Harrowfield Elementary School brought up the usual stuff. The school's official website, a few local news articles about fundraisers and sports teams, a Facebook page with photos of science fairs and holiday concerts. She tried Harrowfield Elementary incident and got nothing useful. Harrowfield Elementary death, and there it was, buried on the 4th page of search results in an archived article from the Harrowfield Gazette dated October 14th, 1987. Local girl's death ruled accidental authorities, close investigation into Harrowfield Elementary tragedy. Claire leaned forward. The article was brief. Small-town journalism at its most economical. A girl named Melissa Tanner, age 9, had been found unresponsive in the 3rd floor hallway of Harrowfield Elementary School on the morning of October 12, 1987. She had been a 4th grade student. The cause of death had initially been listed as undetermined, pending investigation, but the Harrowfield County Medical Examiner had subsequently ruled it accidental. A fall, possibly resulting from a seizure, possibly from sleepwalking. The article noted that the school had been locked at the time and that there was no evidence of foul play. It also noted, in the last paragraph, almost as an afterthought, Melissa Tanner is survived by her parents, Robert and Janet Tanner, of 4 Birch Lane, Harrowfield, and her younger brother Daniel. She was a straight A student who was, by all accounts, a happy and healthy child with no history of medical issues. School officials have declined to comment on how Melissa came to be in the building after hours. Claire read the article 3 times, then she sat back and stared at the ceiling. A 9-year-old girl, in the school after hours, on the 3rd floor, no history of medical issues, no explanation for how she got in. Ruled accidental. She thought about the closed stairwell door, the sign, maintenance access only. She thought about the way Donna's face had shifted, just for a second, when Claire mentioned the 3rd floor. She closed her laptop and told herself to go to sleep. She did not go to sleep for a very long time. The school year started the following Thursday. Claire's 4th grade class had 22 students, a good group she thought, lively and curious and genuinely funny in that specific way that 9 and 10-year-olds are funny, with their absolute confidence in their own logic and their complete inability to filter anything they were thinking. She liked them immediately. She liked teaching immediately. The anxiety she'd been carrying since graduation. What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I made a terrible mistake? Started to loosen its grip within the first week. She settled into a routine. School until 3:30, then papers to grade and lessons to plan, then dinner, then the slow, quiet evenings of a person who was new in town and hadn't yet built a social life. She was working on that. She'd had drinks with Donna twice, and she'd met a few other teachers she liked. It was coming along. She mostly forgot about Melissa Tanner. Mostly. The first time something happened, Claire almost didn't register it as strange. It was a Wednesday, 3 weeks into the school year, late afternoon. The kids had gone home, and Claire was alone in her classroom, room 214, 2nd floor, east wing, grading spelling tests. The hallway outside was quiet, the school settling into its end-of-day silence. The radiators were doing their thing, that rhythmic clanking that she'd gotten almost used to. And then, from directly above her, from the 3rd floor, she heard footsteps, not pipes, not the building settling. Footsteps, distinct, deliberate, the specific sound of a person walking across a wooden floor. Slow, even-paced, not hurried, just walking. Claire looked up at the ceiling. The footsteps continued for maybe 30 seconds, moving from one end of the room above her to the other, and then stopped. She sat very still for a moment. Then she told herself it was a maintenance worker. The sign did say maintenance access only, after all, and went back to her spelling tests. But she listened. For the rest of the afternoon, she listened, and she didn't hear anything else. The second time was different. It was a Friday, mid-October, the 12th, though Claire didn't realize the significance of the date until much later. She'd stayed late to rearrange her classroom, pushing desks into a new configuration she'd been planning, and by the time she was done it was nearly 6 in the evening. The school was empty. She was, as far as she knew, the only person in the building. She was washing her hands in the classroom sink when she heard it. Not footsteps this time. Singing, faint, distant, barely audible over the hiss of the radiators. A child's voice, high and clear and slightly off-key in that specific way children are when they're singing to themselves, unself-consciously, not performing. Claire couldn't make out the words. She turned off the faucet and stood absolutely still. The singing continued. It was coming from above, from the 3rd floor, and it had a quality that was hard to describe. Not threatening exactly, not overtly wrong, but wrong in the way that a picture frame is wrong when it's hanging slightly crooked. You can't always articulate what's bothering you, but something is definitely off. and once you've noticed it, you can't stop noticing it. Because the voice was singing indoors, in an empty, locked building, in the early evening of an October Friday, and it sounded like a child. Claire dried her hands very carefully on the paper towel. She picked up her bag. She walked to her classroom door, opened it, stepped into the hallway. The hallway was empty. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door was slightly ajar, and through it came the fading daylight of early evening, going orange and thin. The singing had stopped. Claire stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then she walked to the stairwell at the end of the hall, the one that led to the third floor, and stopped in front of the door with the sign, "Maintenance access only. Keep door closed." She put her hand on the door handle. She stood there for what felt like a full minute. Then she let go of the handle, turned around, and walked out of the building. She sat in her car in the parking lot for a few minutes before she could bring herself to start the engine. Her hands, she noticed, were shaking slightly. It was probably just a kid, she told herself. Some kid who snuck into the building somehow, playing around. It happens. She believed this approximately 40%. She asked Donna about it the following Monday, keeping her voice deliberately casual, framing it as a funny story. The weirdest thing happened Friday. I thought I heard singing upstairs. Probably just my imagination, right? Donna listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, there was a pause, maybe 3 seconds, which in a normal conversation is nothing, but in this specific conversation felt very long. Before Donna spoke, "You were probably just tired," Donna said. "This job, the first year especially, your brain does weird things when you're stressed." "Probably," Claire said. "You should come to Doyle's with me and Beth on Friday," Donna said. "Get out of the building, get some drinks, meet some people. Small towns aren't so bad once you get to know the right ones." Claire accepted the invitation, but she noticed that Donna hadn't said no. There's definitely no one up there, or it was probably the maintenance crew. She'd said you were probably just tired, which was an answer about Claire's state of mind, not about the third floor. It was the kind of careful non-denial that a person gives when they don't want to lie outright, but also don't want to tell the truth. That night, alone in her house on Elm Street, Claire went back to her laptop. She searched more carefully this time. Melissa Tanner, Harrowfield, Pennsylvania, 1987. She found the original article again, and 2 follow-up pieces. One from the week after the death, covering the funeral, and one from 3 months later, a brief note that the Tanner family had sold their house on Birch Lane and relocated. Then she found something she hadn't found before. A post on a local history forum dated 2019 from a user called Harrowfield Native 1975. Since this thread is about local history and since I'm old enough to remember, I'll say what most people around here won't. The official story about Melissa Tanner is not the whole story. I was a 6th grader at Harrowfield Elementary in 1987. Here's what the kids knew, even if the adults wouldn't say it. Melissa Tanner didn't fall. She was found in the hallway outside room 301 on the 3rd floor. Her locker, locker 119, was in that hallway. The locker was open when they found her. Nobody could explain how she got into the building. Nobody could explain why her locker was open. The official story was she had a seizure and fell. But Melissa Tanner had never had a seizure in her life. 3 weeks before she died, Melissa had told her best friend, "I know who this person is, she still lives in Harrowfield," that she'd been hearing things in the school. A voice calling her name. She thought it was coming from inside her locker. I'm not saying what I think happened. I'm just saying what the kids knew. The 3rd floor has been closed since 1988. Claire read this 4 times. Then she looked up from her laptop and stared at the wall of her living room for a long time. A locker. A voice coming from inside a locker. A 9-year-old girl who'd been hearing her name called. She thought about the singing she'd heard. She thought about the footsteps. She looked up room 301 in her mental map of the school's layout. It would be directly above her classroom, room 214, directly above. Claire told herself she wasn't going to go up there. She told herself this repeatedly over the following 2 weeks, with declining conviction. The sounds continued, not every day, not even every week, but often enough that she'd stopped being able to rationalize them away. Footsteps, twice more. The singing, once. And this time, she had been able to make out a fragment of the melody. A children's song, something she recognized but couldn't place. A nursery rhyme, or a jump rope song. The kind of thing that lives in the deep memory from early childhood. And once, just once, on a Thursday morning before the kids arrived, when the building was still quiet and the early October light was coming through the hallway windows in long slanted bars, she'd heard something that stopped her cold in the middle of the hallway. Her name, not sung, not called out, just spoken, quietly, the way you'd say someone's name to get their attention. Claire, from above. She'd stood absolutely still in the middle of the hallway for a full 30 seconds, her heart going at a pace that wasn't healthy, and then the bell had rung, and kids had started coming through the front doors, and the moment had broken apart. But she'd heard it. She knew she'd heard it. Her name, spoken by a voice she didn't recognize, from directly above. She thought about Melissa Tanner, who had told her best friend she'd been hearing a voice, calling her name, and she thought about what had happened to Melissa Tanner, and she thought, this has to stop. She went up on a Saturday. She'd told herself she was just going to look, that she wasn't going to go far in, that she just needed to see the space with her own eyes, in daylight, so that she could stop her imagination from filling it with things that were probably much worse than the reality. She'd borrowed a key to the building from the front office. Teachers had general access on weekends for lesson prep and classroom work. No one had asked questions, and she arrived at 8 in the morning, when the October daylight was still pale and clear, and the world felt solid and rational. She parked in the empty lot and sat in her car for a minute, just breathing. You're going to go up, look around, see that it's just an old empty hallway, and then you're going to go back downstairs and drive to the diner on Main Street and have pancakes and feel like an idiot, she told herself. She got out of the car. The school was different on weekends. During the week, even after hours, it retained some residual energy of the children. Their noise still seemed to vibrate in the walls somehow, the way a tuning fork keeps humming after you've touched the tines. On a Saturday morning, with no one in it, it was just a building, quiet in a more absolute way. Her footsteps echoed differently. She went to her classroom first, out of habit, dropped her bag on her desk, stood for a moment in the familiar space. The construction paper decorations on the walls, the reading corner with the beanbag chairs, the desks in their new configuration, normal, ordinary. Then she walked to the east stairwell, the door with the sign, "Maintenance access only, keep door closed." The handle was cold under her hand. She turned it. The door opened without resistance. No alarm, no lock. Just a door that swung inward to reveal a narrow stairwell going up. The stairs were the same as the rest of the school. Worn wooden treads, painted risers, a metal handrail along the wall. But here, the smell was different, stronger. That organic, damp quality she'd noticed in the rest of the building was concentrated here, thick and close, and underneath it something else. something faintly sweet in a way that wasn't pleasant, the way old flowers smell when they've been in a vase too long and the water's gone stale. Claire put her hand over her nose and breathed through her mouth for a moment. Then she started up the stairs. The third floor was not what she'd expected. She'd half imagined devastation, collapsed ceiling, water damage, structural ruin that would explain the maintenance access only sign, but it was, in the main, intact. Dusty and dim, lit only by the pale light coming through windows that hadn't been opened in years, but structurally sound. The hallway stretched the length of the building, with classroom doors on either side, all of them closed. The floor was the same worn hardwood as the rest of the school. The walls were the same pale institutional green, faded now, with ghost rectangles where posters and bulletin boards had once hung. It looked like a school that had been closed in a hurry and then just left. Desks still visible through the glass panels in the classroom doors, a globe on a shelf in one room, a chalkboard with something still written on it in one room. She squinted through the glass but couldn't make it out. Just abandoned, like someone had locked the door and walked away from an ordinary Tuesday and never come back. She moved slowly down the hallway, her footsteps loud in the silence. She was looking for room 301. She found it halfway down the hall. On the left side, the door had a placard, the same kind as all the other rooms, white plastic with black letters, room 301. And through the glass panel, she could see an empty classroom, smaller than hers, darker. The windows on this side faced north, and the morning light hadn't reached them yet. And in the hallway outside room 301, on the right-hand wall, there were lockers. 2 rows of them, floor to ceiling, painted the same industrial green as the walls, but with rust bleeding through in patches. Most of them were closed. A few had doors hanging open at odd angles, the hinges gone to rust. She started reading the numbers. 110, 112, 114. She walked slowly, trailing her fingers along the cool metal surfaces. 116, 117, 118, 119. She stopped. Locker 119 was closed. Unlike most of the others, it looked, and this was a strange word to apply to an old locker in an abandoned hallway, but it was the right word. It looked maintained. The paint wasn't as badly rusted. The door sat flush and straight in its frame. The combination lock, an old dial type, the kind they didn't use anymore, was turned to 0. Claire stood in front of it for a long moment. She reached out and touched the door. Cold. Much colder than the adjacent lockers. Noticeably, significantly colder, the way a basement wall is cold. A cold that seemed to come from inside rather than just from the ambient temperature of the hallway. She thought about what she'd read. The locker was open when they found her. She put her hand on the lock. And from inside the locker, very clearly, very close, she heard a sound, a small sound, the kind a child makes when they've been crying and have stopped, mostly, but haven't quite gotten their breathing back under control. A small, hitching breath. From inside the locker that was too small for a person to fit inside. Claire took her hand off the lock. She stepped back. The sound continued for a moment, that small, wet, hitching breath, and then stopped. The hallway was absolutely silent. The pale October light lay flat and cold across the dusty floor. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe knocked once, twice. Claire turned around and walked back down the hallway. She did not run. She was very deliberate about not running. She walked to the stairwell door, went through it, pulled it closed behind her, and then stood on the landing for a moment, her hand flat against the door, her forehead almost touching the wood. Her heart was going very fast. It was a bird, she thought. A bird got in somehow, through a broken window. Birds make sounds like that, but she knew it wasn't a bird. She called Donna that afternoon. I went up to the 3rd floor, she said without preamble. A long pause on the other end of the line. Claire, I heard something in locker 119. Another pause, longer this time. Can you come over? Donna said finally. Her voice had changed. The brisk practicality was gone. I think, yeah. Can you come over? I'll make coffee. Donna's house was a yellow Victorian 2 streets over from Clare's, with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides and a big orange cat that watched Clare from the porch railing with the profound disinterest of a creature who has seen things. Inside, the house was warm and cluttered in a comfortable way. Bookshelves everywhere, kids' artwork on the refrigerator. Donna had 2 of her own, both in middle school now, both at their father's this weekend. They sat at the kitchen table with mugs of coffee, and Donna told her what she knew. She'd been teaching at Harrowfield Elementary for 11 years, but she'd grown up in Harrowfield. She'd been 9 years old when Melissa Tanner died. She hadn't known Melissa well. Different grades, different friend groups, but she knew what everyone in town knew, and what no one in town said aloud. Melissa was a normal kid, Donna said. I didn't know her well, but I knew her. You'd see her on the playground. You'd see her at the grocery store with her mom. There wasn't anything off about her, you know. She was just a kid. What happened to her? Donna wrapped her hands around her mug. Officially, she fell. Seizure, they said, or she was sleepwalking. She fell and hit her head on the floor. That's the official story. And unofficially? Unofficially, Donna exhaled slowly. My mother's best friend was Janet Tanner, Melissa's mom. They're not in touch anymore. The Tanners moved away about 6 months after it happened. Went to Pittsburgh, I think. But before they left, Janet told my mom some things. She paused. This is all secondhand. You understand that? I understand. In the 2 or 3 weeks before Melissa died, she'd been different. Not sick, not scared exactly, more like distracted. Like she was listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. She'd space out in the middle of conversations. She stopped sleeping well. She told her mom she'd been having dreams about the school, about a girl in her dreams who wanted to show her something. Claire set down her coffee cup. In the dreams, the girl was always in the same place, Donna continued, standing in the hallway outside room 301, just standing there, waiting. Melissa said the girl never spoke in the dreams, just looked at her, like she was waiting for Melissa to figure something out. Did she describe the girl? Dark hair, thin, wearing a dress, old-fashioned, like from the 40s or 50s. Melissa told her mom the girl seemed sad, not scary, sad, like she'd been waiting for a very long time. And then, on the night of October 11th, 1987, Melissa walked out of her house at approximately 2 in the morning while her parents were asleep. The back door was found unlocked in the morning. Nobody knows how she got into the school. The school was locked, they checked. All the doors, all the windows, everything locked. And yet somehow she was on the 3rd floor. Donna paused. Outside room 301. In front of locker 119. Donna looked at her sharply. You've been doing your research. The forum post, 2019. A user called Harrowfield Native. Donna nodded slowly. That was Tom Elliott. He was 2 years ahead of me. His sister was Melissa's best friend. He said Melissa had been hearing a voice in her locker. Yeah, Donna looked down at her coffee. There's something else. Something Janet told my mom that my mom told me years later, when I was grown and she figured I could handle it. She looked up. When they found Melissa, her locker was open. All her school things were inside. Her books, her folders, everything exactly as she'd left it on Friday afternoon. All of it normal, except on the inside of the locker door, scratched into the paint, not written. Scratched, like with a fingernail or something sharp. There were words. The kitchen was very quiet. The cat had come inside and was sitting on the counter, watching them both with its amber eyes. What did it say? Claire asked, though some part of her already knew she didn't want to know. She is still here, Donna said, and she is so cold. Please don't leave her alone. Claire spent the next week in the school's own archives, boxes of old records kept in a storage room off the main office, disorganized and dusty but largely intact. A 70-year accumulation of class photos and attendance records and incident reports and the mundane paper trail of institutional life. She was looking for someone who might have died in the school before Melissa Tanner, someone whose presence had persisted. She found her on a Wednesday evening in a box labeled 1943 to 1952. Her name was Dorothy Aldrich. She had been a fourth-grade student at Harrowfield Elementary. She had died on the premises on December 4th, 1948, at the age of 9. Unlike the Melissa Tanner case, there was no ambiguity in the records about what had happened to Dorothy Aldrich. It was a tragedy, straightforward in its mechanics if not in its horror. A faulty steam radiator in room 301. A malfunction that had been reported twice that fall and not adequately repaired, a leak that had gone unaddressed. Dorothy had arrived early to school. She was, according to the attendance records, frequently early. She was a student who loved school, and she had been alone in room 301 when the radiator malfunctioned catastrophically. By the time anyone else arrived, it was too late. The incident report was clinical in its language, as such documents always are. Claire read it twice, her throat tight. Dorothy Aldrich, 9 years old. Dark hair, according to the class photograph from the 1948 to 49 school year. A small, serious girl in a plaid dress, her hair in braids, looking directly at the camera, with eyes that were somehow both young and very old. Her locker number, noted in the student records, 119. Claire should have left it alone. She knew that, even at the time. She had found what she was looking for. A name, a story, an explanation for what was happening in the building. She should have taken that knowledge and done nothing with it, except maybe shared it with a therapist, and definitely not gone back to the third floor. She went back on a Friday night in November. She told herself she was going to talk to Dorothy. She'd read enough about hauntings, more than she'd ever expected to read in her life. Late night hours of it, the good scholarly stuff and the ridiculous stuff, all of it. To know that sometimes all a ghost needed was to be acknowledged, to be seen, to have someone say, "I know you're here. I know what happened to you. You're not forgotten." She brought a candle because it felt right, and a photograph she'd photocopied from the 1948 yearbook. Dorothy in her class photo, serious-faced and braided. She told exactly one person where she was going and why. She texted Donna at 7 p.m., "Going to the school tonight, 3rd floor. If you don't hear from me by 10, call someone." She half expected Donna to call her immediately and tell her she was out of her mind. Instead, after about 10 minutes, Donna texted back, "Be careful, I mean it, and keep your phone on you." which was not the response of a person who thought Claire was being irrational. The school at night was a different creature entirely. She'd been in it after hours before, but always in the early evening, always with daylight still in the mix. This was different. This was 11 o'clock on a November night, the parking lot empty, the building dark, except for the emergency exit signs that cast their perpetual red glow in the stairwells and hallways. She let herself in through the side entrance and stood for a moment just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust. The building breathed around her. That was the only way she could describe it. A slow, rhythmic quality to the silence, the radiators on their cycling, the settling of old wood and old brick, the faint movement of air through the ventilation system. Alive in the way all buildings are alive, inhabited by decades of accumulated presence. She walked to the east stairwell, up one flight to the second floor, her hallway, her classroom. She paused outside room 214 for just a moment, her hand on the door frame, grounding herself in the familiar. Then she went to the stairwell door. Maintenance access only. She pushed it open and went up. The third floor was darker than it had been on Saturday morning. The only light came from the emergency exit sign at the far end of the hallway. A red wash that was enough to see by, but that gave everything the quality of an old photograph, something seen through a filter, slightly unreal. Claire lit the candle. The flame steadied almost immediately. She walked down the hallway. Her footsteps, which had been so loud in the silence, seemed to quiet as she went further in, as if the space were absorbing the sound. She passed closed classroom doors, the dusty geometry of abandoned spaces. She held the candle carefully, watching her own shadow move on the wall beside her. Locker 119. She stopped in front of it. In the candlelight, the green paint looked darker, almost black. The cold she'd felt before was there again, radiating outward, a cold that had nothing to do with the building's heating. She set the candle on the floor, carefully, on a flagstone of the floor where it wouldn't tip. She took out the photocopied yearbook page. She held it up. "Dorothy," she said. Her voice sounded strange in the empty hallway. Too small, too human. "Dorothy Aldrich, I know your name. I know what happened to you."